This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Another night, another round of gunfire in Surrey.
A scary series of events here in Surrey. One family home shot twice in less than a week.
Extortion cases are piling up in the Lower Mainland, and you could call Surrey the front line. There have been more than
Surrey residents have heard these headlines since 2024. But over the summer, the extortion threats and shootings have spiked dramatically, as links to Indian gangs and provincial task forces grow the scope of the investigation. Members of Surrey's South Asian community continue to live in uncertainty. Unfortunately, the numbers don't quell their concerns. Just yesterday, Surrey Police Service released new data on the surge in extortion threats and the resulting violence. 80 victims, 44 calls to report shots fired, and 101 extortion files. At a CBC town hall meeting on the topic last week, residents refused to let their frustrations go unheard. Thunderous applause rang out through the Arts Centre following fiery speeches filled with bold language. An assistant commissioner with the RCMP admitted to the tense room that the extortion task force started on the back foot, an answer that Mohkam Malik expected. Malik serves on the Youth Parliament of BC and was born and raised in Surrey. His political aspirations led him to study at UBC, but he feels the issues dominating his community are above municipal politics. They require attention from the very top. I spoke with him about the personal stories lost in the newsrooms, as well as the impact on his neighborhood.
I think that the community over the past couple of weeks has gotten more frustrated and not less. Just with the amount of things that are currently happening. I think one of the tipping points was in the last week, we saw that there was that very visceral video of that massive house in South Surrey getting shot not once but twice. And a lot of people in the community feel, how brazen is it that it's light out, 2, 3 o'clock, someone's house is getting shot up on a Saturday. The shooters have made a video of it, and no progress has been made. And it didn't happen once, but it happened twice to the same people.
Mm-hmm. What you're describing, what it sounds like in my opinion, is a sense of confidence from these shooters. They can do this at 2 o'clock in broad daylight, and they're not concerned.
Oh, 100%. That I think that the attacks have gotten a lot more brazen, especially when we see repeated attacks on repeated individuals.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What does this mean for the future of Surrey,
I think that, and this is one of the things that we've seen in the Public Safety Committee, is our numbers in terms of the Crime Severity Index were actually trending downwards for the city of Surrey. And other than this rash of extortions, other crimes have actually gone down in the city of Surrey. And so what we should have been seeing is headlines that said, hey, our city's actually safer. Because on par for some residents, it is safer. But for South Asians like myself, especially in, I want to say, the past 6 months, the city has gotten a lot more unsafe just with the brazenness of these extortion-related shootings. Because I think if extortions are a big problem, and yes, that makes people unsafe, but what makes them really unsafe is the brazenness of it. The fact that it's happening during the day, the fact that it's happening multiple times to repeated businesses is what says to some residents, hey, I do not feel safe at all because I feel like no action is getting taken to solve this issue.
What's the RCMP and the Surrey Police Force, what are they doing to quell those concerns, to make the community feel better?
We've seen South Asian officers go into South Asian business centers, in particular the Pyle Business Center and others in Newton, and do regular check-ins with business owners, and that definitely makes people feel safer. But we're not, at least in my opinion, we're not seeing the kind of broad sweeping action that we should be seeing. And many residents are taking that to be, one of the failures of the provincial government to act on this issue.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely on partially the provincial government, but as you may have heard in that town hall meeting just a couple of days ago, this is more than a provincial, issue. This extends internationally, right? How does that make you feel?
It does expand internationally, and I think that's where the federal government has to get involved. And we have seen the RCMP that came out last year and said, yes, these things are linked to Indian interference, and we saw that the federal government did take action to list the Bishnoi gang as a terrorist gang. But we need to see more action. The listing was great, but we now have to see the federal government direct resources to the RCMP so that they can actually act and use their new powers under the terrorist designation to put resources on the front line to stop this from happening.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like, federally or provincially, that your community feels heard?
I think that the community is feeling heard, but there's a frustration because we've been talking about this issue for a while. So shootings related to extortion go as far back as 2023, I think, and we've been seeing videos of people's houses being shot up for that amount of time as well. There's been multiple videos of, someone holding the camera and all you can see is their hand and the gun and them shooting a house. And so the community feels like this has been a massive issue that, governments have only taken action on in the past 6 months because it's been so brazen. And that's really frustrating because we've been calling for action on this issue for a long time. And we feel it shouldn't have gotten to this point. And so now that it has gotten to this point, we feel that not enough action is being taken even still.
What does that say about the speed of the reaction from the Surrey police force as well as the RCMP?
I think that the problem is that because it's such a complex and broad issue, that sometimes it's hard for local jurisdictions to take concrete action because they don't want to step on anyone's toes, right? So it's hard for the local RCMP detachment or Surrey police to go ahead and make a broad sweeping remark about how they're going to stop this or how they need more help from the federal government, because there's a lot of kind of intra-politics at play where the RCMP detachment can't say anything until national RCMP says something. And the Surrey detachment is governed by a board, and the board can't necessarily speak out against the provincial government because the provincial government appoints the board, right? And so because it's such a complex issue and there's so many different jurisdictions at play, it's hard for one jurisdiction to make that broad sweeping action. And because of that, we're at a point now where we've had multiple months of slow progress when really 6 months ago a lot of these things should have been done rather than getting them done today.
Yeah, I see. But if we're talking about jurisdictions and overlapping responsibilities or people trying to figure out who's in charge of what, essentially, obviously now there's the RCMP involved, there's the provincial extortion task force involved, as well as the SPS. I'm asking you, do you think there's confusion in the community over who's in charge of what?
I think that many in the community don't necessarily care who's in charge of what. What they care about is results. So the fact that we have 3 different task forces, one that is provincial, one that is RCMP, and one that is Surrey Police, doesn't concern the community because a task force is a task force. What we care about is the fact that we haven't seen arrests. What we care about is the fact that it doesn't look like there's more boots on the ground at night to actually patrol when a lot of this extortion-related shooting happens, right? The fact that the Prime Minister came last week, and he was about 1.5 kilometers away at the White Rock Pier from where that shooting in South Surrey happened, and then it happened again. Showcases to us that we feel that real action isn't being taken.
Walk me through that. What are the emotions tied to having, a figure so important seemingly overlook your concerns and the problems facing the community?
Well, I think that, and maybe this is something that a lot of leaders don't necessarily grasp, is this is an issue that affects every level of the community. So we saw recently that the Law Society of British Columbia, which is the governing body that regulates lawyers in the province, put out a statement and said, hey, we've heard from some lawyers that they've also been extorted, and so here are resources for our members. And so from the community perspective, we feel that everyone from international students who have come here very recently, to people who are just starting businesses, to people who've been here for a long time, to people who are even in prestigious positions of authority, such as lawyers and doctors, and even, members of the police themselves are feeling threatened, that this is an issue that touches everyone in the community. And a lot of people are telling me that they don't feel that our leaders are grasping that as an issue, that they just feel like it's an issue that's affecting a certain subset rather than the entire community.
As the impact ripples through the community, police at all levels work to apprehend those responsible and rebuild public trust. This was our interview show, For the Record. I'm Mohkam Singh, and you're listening to BCIT's The Crow.